In 2012, there was a record number of deaths and suicide attempts in the Clark County Jail. In response to the growing concerns, the Sheriff's Office and the County Commissioners have taken steps to make the jail safer. Recently, we spoke with Corrections Commander Ric Bishop to learn what actions have already taken place and plans for new initiatives.
Hello, I'm Jim Demmel with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you for meeting with us.
Thank you, Jim. Nice to be here.
How many suicides and suicide attempts took place in the jail in 2012?
In 2012, we had 19 suicide attempts, of which 4 of them were successful.
Okay. How does this compare to previous years?
Well, in 2011, we had 18 attempts, of which 2 were successful. And as you can see, the attempts and the success rate went up.
Now, is this nationally, follow kind of national patterns?
Well, it's hard to take jails and compare them because their designs are different, the communities are different, the tax base is different, the services are different. So what we do is we go to the Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics and look at that. In 1983, there were 147 suicides for every 100,000 inmates incarcerated nationally. In 2002, that rate dropped almost in half, and again dropped down to 36 in 2006. So nationally, jail suicide rates have dropped where Clark County's has, as you've seen, gone up.
Now what about in 2013, this year so far?
So far this year, we have put in a number of screening steps and done some modifications to the main jail, which we feel have been successful, and we've had no successful suicides in 2013. Further, we have changed how we classify suicide attempts. It's no longer if our officer thinks, or our deputy, excuse me, thinks it's a suicide attempt, we have our mental health counselor and our psychiatrist deem whether or not it was an attempt or an actual attempt versus some type of other behavior.
Do you believe there's some main reasons for these?
Well, yeah, there's several factors, but the 2 major driving factors, the first one is the jail is seeing more mentally ill being housed in our main jail. And the second is the facility design. This facility was designed back in the 70s, built in the early 80s, and was they never anticipated the large number of mentally ill individuals housed in that type of facility.
Okay. Now, I know you can't get into specifics, but how are inmates even able to attempt suicide while in prison?
Well, you're right, I can't. But I think there's an example, if you don't mind me.
Sure.
We don't allow certain things in the jail, and the public doesn't understand why. But before that, let me ask you a question. Have you, Jim, been in jail?
Fortunately, no.
Okay. Well, then you don't know, and most people who've never been in jail don't know that people have a lot of time on their hands to make things or manipulate common household items into other forms and other uses. We don't allow this pen in the jail, and we'll tell you it's for safety reasons. And most people will say, well, why? It's a pen. My loved one's going to write a letter. They're going to write some things down. Well, with just a few moments, I can take the average pen like this by poking these things around. I now have a handle, a plastic handle. Put this together. I take this spring, I straighten it out, I melt it with some heat device in there. I go to my cement wall, which we've got lots of cement walls in the jail. I sharpen it up. I take my pen, I take a toothpaste cap, I put it off to the side, I break the pen, a little bit of water. I take the ink, I water it down. I now have a Class A tattoo kit.
Ooh.
Further, I take that toothpaste and I take a piece of paper. I use it for adhesive. I put it over the camera so the deputy can't see it, or the window so the deputy can't see it. And I give my buddy, or I give myself, what's called a jailhouse tattoo. Now, imagine.
Now, we should say kids don't try this at
home. Oh, absolutely not. This is highly unsanitary. We have rules against this, and this is why we don't do this. Going back, if I give me a moment with a color newspaper print, and now I've got multiple colors. Now, my experience in the jail with people who want to harm themselves is all they need is a protrusion, a strip of cloth, and a few inches, and they can do some permanent damage to themselves.
Wow. So things you wouldn't even think.
Things you would not think of, people use for other ways with a little bit of time on their hands.
Now, how do the actions by these inmates impact the community?
Well, the first impact is to our corrections deputies and our nursing staff. These are well-trained, seasoned, and dedicated public safety employees. But every time you respond to a death scene, there's an emotional toll. The second is on the families. I've sat with a number of these families. They are grief-stricken. They blame themselves. They wonder what they could have done to help this person avoid this situation. And then they have the emotional trauma of trying to carry on afterwards. And the most public impact is some of these families, when they're feeling this loss and pain, look for someone else to blame. And in this case, they blame the sheriff or his staff for that person's death, and they file some kind of legal action, which puts taxpayers' money at risk and then makes the headlines.
Okay. Now there are some people who would have little sympathy for people spending time in jail. Why is it so important to keep these inmates safe?
You're right. Sympathy is not something that the average person has for someone in jail. And let me say first, as I'm speaking, it's alleged. If I say someone did something, but it's alleged, or unless they're convicted. And it's difficult. Someone breaks into your car, steals your car, breaks into your home, hurts you or a loved one. It is difficult to have sympathy for that person. My experience is that at that moment when they allegedly, or they do commit that crime, they're in total control. They're calling the shots, they're in control, they're the power person. Afterwards, and there's a time when either it's the handcuffs, the back of the patrol car, when they come to our booking desk and we take all of their things and we inventory them, or maybe it's when the jail door slams shut that they realize, I'm not in control anymore. I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't wear what I want to, and I can't go somewhere without someone else letting me do it. At that moment, most people go from that powerful perpetrator to a very scared person who wonders what's going to happen next. It's at that moment that we have to convince them and let them know eventually they're going to get out of jail. This is a temporary situation, and they should not take a permanent action to a very temporary situation. They will get out of jail, and they will be released. And they have to plan on that. And that's what we're working towards. Now, I will just make a comment. There are people who will say, I can do time on my head. Oh, they use the term, I can do time standing on my head. If they wish to do time standing on their head, we have the proper beds, we have the proper cells, and we have the proper process. We've got a highly trained staff, one of the best in the country, and they'll let them do time if they want to.
Okay. Now you've been tasked with trying to make the jail safer.
Yes.
What steps have you taken so far?
Well, the first step, and the most visible one, was to recess all of the sprinkler heads in the main jail. As of March of 2013, all of the current living areas that had sprinkler heads have now been recessed back into the wall. Okay. We have new screening procedures in place, in particular for arresting officers are now mandated to transfer information about the arrestee to our booking staff. If they've got a concern, if the person made a suicidal statement,
okay.
Or if they notice the person in the back of that patrol car, I told you that sometimes they go from being in charge to all of a sudden realizing they're going to jail. They let us know and they transfer that information to our booking staff. We have medical screenings and our classification screen. We've also expanded our mental health from 80 hours a week to 120 hours a week to include weekends and holidays. And we are, as I speak, in the middle of our first training course for our corrections deputies on dealing with the mentally ill. A lot of changes have happened in just the last few months.
Do you have some future plans that will be coming and implementation dates? Times?
Well, later this fall, our deputies will be going to an advanced working with the mentally ill. That's the one that I took last year with the headphones on, with the voices that they simulated the voices for 45 minutes. It was a eye-opening experience. We are continuing with our mental health training, and on top of that, we are looking at designating a section of the jail for mentally ill and dedicating some resources and training just for those folks coming in.
Any cost estimates on these types of changes you've taken and you're planning to take?
Well, the Board of County Commissioners last year made $545,000 available to us for physical, structural changes to the facility and some other health and safety changes that we're making. We have not even spent $200,000 yet, and we've done a number of changes. It's still early to say. We don't know whether we're going back to the board with a request for more money, or whether we're going to go back with a thank you, and here's the refund. But I guarantee you, between the General Services Director and his staff, which have been fabulous to work with, and the Sheriff's Office staff, we're squeezing every tax dollar to get the most we can out of it.
Okay. So we talked about briefly, you talked about the traumatic experience of going into jail.
Yes.
How do you try to make it easier, if you can, to help?
Sure. We've taken some steps. First is to let people know that you're going to get out of jail. The average length of stay in the jail is 16 days in 2012. And we need, when that person realizes, like I said, they go from that perpetrator who is all-powerful to that person who's looking in the jail going, what's going to happen to me? We need to make sure they understand that they're going to be released. They may be released on bail. They may be released by the court on supervised release. They may be found guilty and do their time and be released, or they may be found guilty and transferred to the penitentiary. But they will leave our jail. It is not a permanent situation. So if they don't like what they're eating, being told when to go to bed, told when to get up, told when to move, then don't steal. Here's how you get a job. Here are the resources in the community. If you're a bad spouse, don't hit. Here are the resources. If you're not a good parent and you abuse or you neglect, here are the resources. If you're doing drugs or you're abusing alcohol, here are the resources. These are all, just about all of them are free in our community. It's called reentry. And if you want to make the choice to break that cycle, or you don't want to ever come back to us because you're a first-time offender, here's the information. It's called, I said, reentry. And you can break the cycle, but it's your choice. We will provide you the tools. Back in I started back in the late 70s, early 80s. When we tried to rehabilitate everyone, it didn't work. Mm-hmm. In the 90s, we tried to lock everyone up. It didn't work. We are today providing people with a choice. You want the tools? We will give you the opportunity. If you want the opportunity, we'll give you the tools. Here they are. You want to do your time? As I said before, we have well-trained people out in the street and in the jail that will accommodate your wishes. That is how we take that trauma and help the community, the families, and that person make a better life for themselves.
Okay. We talked a little bit about the mentally ill.
Yes.
And you have seen an increase in the number of mentally ill?
There is a dramatic increase. In 1983, 6% of the jails, the national jail population, that 6% was seriously mentally ill. In 2010, a study sponsored by the National Association of Sheriffs and the Treatment Advocacy Center did a report entitled "More Mentally Ill in Jails and Prisons Than in Hospitals." Mm. They found it went from 6% seriously mentally ill in jails to 16%. Mm. Further, in 1955, there was one psychiatric bed for every 300 Americans. Today, there's one for every 3,000. Mm. Psychiatric or mental health dollars and programs are drying up. The study went on to say that 40% of the seriously mentally ill in our community have been in jail or prison at some time. We have seen a steep spike in our mentally ill population in jails, in our jail in particular.
And I imagine that would be an incredibly costly alternative to mental health care alone.
We have, when I first started, we had a mental health counselor who was there part-time. We now today have 3 mental health counselors, 120 hours a week, 1 psych nurse practitioner, and 1 psychiatrist. And that's just our mental health staff. So yes, besides that, they stay longer, and they act out. And then you've got medications that eventually that the doctor or the psych nurse practitioner prescribes for them, or they come in with and their family lets us know about, and we can get them to them. And so there's a cost there for those very expensive psychiatric meds. So yes, there's a great deal more cost associated with the mentally ill in a jail versus someplace else.
Now, if people want more information about the safety issues in the jail, where can they check?
They can go to the sheriff's Clark County website, www.clark.law.gov, after which sheriff, and then it says custody. We're changing to corrections, but it does say custody for right now. Our phone number's there, our email address is there, and then general delivery at the sheriff's address. If it's a jail question, put jail in the subject line, and it will get to one of the managers or administrators.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a very interesting conversation.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.